sustainability in the Jordan River Basin. I'm especially honored to welcome our Palestinian partners, Assalamu alaikum, ahlan wa sahlan, and our distinguished speakers. Before I come to making a few remarks on the rationale of this conference, I would like to thank the Porter School for hosting us here and thank the Friends of the Arava Institute, the board members of the Friends of the Arava Institute, our donors, and the foundations who supported the Track to Environmental Forum, and also some governmental offices and the US government. Your support is crucial for the success of the efforts of the Track 2. The United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees estimates that since 2008, there was more than 21 million refugees around the world, refugees because of the extreme weather conditions. And in the year 2021, only at that year, there were more than 3 million refugees just in the Middle East and North Africa. Increasing temperature, droughts, increasing the aquifer salinity, sea level rise, and the destructive sandstorms are some of the realities that await the MENA region in the next 50 years. The 2017 World Bank study notes that the Gulf states will also face increasingly depleted water supplies in the next 50 years. Water scarcity could potentially cost countries across the region between 6 to 14% of their GDP, affecting a wide range of industries and economies. And let's get closer to this region. The Delta of the Nile it's a place that employs 20% of the Egyptian labor force. It's responsible for 12% of Egypt's GDP. And it's also considered as the food basket of Egypt. The Delta Nile is suffering from the saltwater intrusion, conflict over water, and heat-related pests and diseases, and the destroyed crop yields and other climate impacts. As climate change continues to hit our region, those who migrate from the Middle East, North Africa will seek to migrate to richer economies in Southern Europe or into the developed world in rates that much higher than what we see today. And this puts actually Europe to the test, the ability and the willingness of Europe to absorb millions of new migrants and refugees. Indeed, the millions fleeing conflict across the border from the border of the Middle East and Africa over the past decade have dramatically affected the socio-political dynamics across Europe, including Greece, the UK, France, Italy, and Sweden. Increased immigration waves from the Middle East and Africa impacted many of these nations' voting patterns and political leanings, resulting in governments with hard-line stances on immigration, like in Hungary and Italy. And we also how the Syrian refugee issue impacted the elections in Turkey last week. Projects like the Track 2 are essential to give the people in this region the knowledge, the technology they need to cope with climate change in order to stay in their lands. Climate change is not only an environmental threat, but also a first-degree security issue. And let me give you a few facts about the Palestinian case. The median age in Palestine is 20, and the latest statistics say it's 19. 57% of the Palestinians are under the age of 24, and only 8% are above 55 years. Ashraf, we are minorities here. Also happened in 1993. The last elections in the Palestinian Authority took place in 2006. That means more than 50% of the electorate, those who are between 18 and 35, has never had a chance to make their voices heard by the ballot. The population growth in the Jordan Valley is 5% less than the average population growth in Palestine, which means that the population in the Jordan Valley, because of the immigration, because the farmers leave their lands and go to the city centers, it's not at the same rate of the Palestinian average. How can we begin to manage the issue of the climate change? To avert such a massive looming problem requires programmatic solutions and their immediate implementation. The climate change is already upon us, but there are ways to adapt and to mitigate climate change. We all know that one country alone cannot deal with climate change. Regional cooperation is a must. That's why the Arava Institute has established the Regional Center for Climate Change Policy and Research, a center that will serve as a regional hub to bring climate experts to discuss and generate ideas that help people of the region to cope with the consequences of climate change. Our work at the Track 2 Environmental Forum is the greatest proof that regional cooperation is possible. The applied environmental diplomacy can catalyze positive change on ground and on the political arena, and we saw that happening in the last 2 years. The goal of this conference is to provide a platform for Palestinian and Israeli environmental changemakers to highlight their cross-border environmental cooperation. These efforts have been enhanced by our strategic partnership with Oxford Martin School of Oxford University. Last but not least, my deepest gratitude goes to everyone who have directly and indirectly supported the success of this conference. I wish you a very productive conference with exciting and encouraging discussions and exchange of knowledge so that together we can anticipate future of groundbreaking knowledge, research, and technology for humanities. I wish you a lot of new ideas and the best of success. As I said at the beginning, this conference is in the name of our friend and colleague Noam Segal. He started all of this concept of regional modeling of natural resources, and this annual conference is just to continue the path that he started. We really miss him, and I personally still don't believe that he's not among us. And now it's my pleasure to invite Peretz, Noam's father, to say a few words. Thank you.
Honorable scholars of the Arava Institute, Oxford Martin School.
Peretz, you have to speak into the microphone.
Honorable scholars of the Arava Institute, the Oxford Martin School, Oxford University, the Porter School of Environmental and Earth Studies, Tel Aviv University, practitioners, ladies and gentlemen. There is a Talmudic saying that the predestination of those who passed is that they are forgotten. Nevertheless, Noam, our beloved son, is in our heart and mind every day, and we continue to grieve his loss. We are deeply thankful to you for holding the annual event on applied environmental diplomacy in his memory and for continuing his legacy. The topic of this event, democracy and sustainability in the Jordan River Basin, corresponds specifically to Noam's character, belief, and vision. With your permission, I wish to say some words on Noam in this context. From childhood, Noam strived to enjoy personal independence. Already at school, he argued with teachers that study should be through open discussion in the class. Many times, I was called to the school principal to resolve conflict with his teachers as he disregarded their hierarchy. After his military service, he studied computing programming to fully support himself during his academic studies and enjoy personal autonomy. Naturally, his postgraduate professional activity promoting social and environmental policies was through civil society entities. His understanding of democratic processes was that the policy should be an outcome of deliberation among the relevant parties to consolidate consensual agreed resolutions and not resolutions determined by political authorities and supported by legal power. Nowadays, democracy in Israel and other states is under attack by governments who wish to overcome parliamentary and judicial review to strengthen their rule. Their argument is that in a democracy, the majority entitles government to realize its policy regardless of the minority's opinion. Commentators relate these developments to personal ambitions and interests of the elected political figures and not to a breakdown of democracy. On this matter, I believe that Noam shared Hannah Arendt's analysis of the evolution of modern social democracy. In her book, The Human Condition, she explained that when humans gather together in big masses, almost inevitably they will develop tendency toward tyranny. Subsequently, based, I assume, on her personal experience in Germany in the 40s of last century, she writes that even the most social democratic region of a nation state might become extremely cruel in some circumstances. Therefore, she says, democracy can exist only when everything is determined by words and convincing, and not by authoritative power. And she concludes, to be free means to be free from inequality which exists in governmental relations, and to move in a sphere which is clean from governors and governed. According to her research, this was the essence of democracy in the Greek polis. Indeed, I think that only by reviving the dialogical character of democracy and decisions achieved through consensus building processes will we seize the deteriorating of democracy in our era. I'm eagerly looking forward to hear about the model of democracy developed in the Applied Environmental Diplomacy project. Hopefully, about your work now will be remembered as achievements praiseworthy.
Okay, I would like to now invite Ambassador Daniel Shek, who is going to lead the first panel.
Panelists, please join me.
The title of the panel is The Crisis of Democracy, the Environment, and the Role of Civil Society.
We're missing a panelist. Orli?
I didn't realize it was the first panel. I'm sorry.
I promise I will. Good evening, all. My name is Daniel Shek. I'm my name is Daniel Shek. I am a member of the Board of Directors of the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies and a member of the Joint Implementation Committee of the Track 2 Environmental Forum. As David mentioned, the title of this panel is The Crisis of Democracy, the Environment, and the Role of Civil Society, which means our panelists could talk more or less just about anything. I'm here to make sure that they don't. I will try and keep them in track, but I will, I will introduce them as they are called upon to speak. I'd just like to say a few words of introduction. Although I'm not quite certain I can explain it, explain this phenomenon, but environmental issues have worldwide become a nearly exclusive agenda of the liberal left, as if the upcoming catastrophes that we are expecting will only hit liberals, and conservatives will consider themselves as being spared. By the way, this is not the only issue that is very much identified with the liberal left. By coincidence, we are today on Gay Pride Day in Tel Aviv. The LGBTQ issues are also very much identified with the liberal left. So, you know, on the one hand, it might have made your arrival here more difficult, but on the other hand, this has everything to do with the fight for democracy. As a result of this phenomenon, green parties tend to join only, again, around the world, to join left-leaning coalitions, and civil society-based environmental organizations are always have the image as being identified in the sector of human rights, freedom of speech. Again, there is no logical explanation or scientific explanation why these issues concern liberals more than conservatives, but that is the fact of the matter. Israel is in the middle of a struggle and a fight to maintain its democratic identity, and behind these protests are NGOs, civil society-based organizations, much like ours, to be honest, although I must say that we are a particularly horrific combination of human rights, environment, and peace building, God forbid. That is really scandalous. But the Arava Institute and the More and our collaborative work is definitely in that sector. So this is what we're going to talk about, and we're going to do this. I'll try to converse with our friends here. We don't have very much time, but we'll try and cover the main issues. I'd like to start with Dov Khenin, who is a former Israeli member of Knesset, with a sustained agenda both in peace building, Arab-Israeli dialogue, and environmental affairs, so he is completely in the right spot. And he is also, as we will discover in a moment, a member of President Herzog's, or rather the leader of President Herzog's climate forum. So Dov, I'd like to ask you, because I know that you are also in the leadership of the protest movement, is there a green element in this protest movement? And should there be?
First of all, I'm very glad to be here. It's a very, very important event for me to remember Noam in such a way. And coming to the issues you presented in your opening remarks, I would like to say very briefly three remarks. One, about the social, deeper nature of climate crisis. Climate crisis affects all of us. That is correct, of course, but we can, copy the famous phrase of Orwell from Animal Farm. There are some who are harmed much more. So people who are poor, minorities, vulnerable population are harmed much more than others because of the climate crisis, and therefore this is a challenge for us to connect all these people to problems that is actually not ours only, but mainly theirs, or first of all theirs. Second very important remark is connected to the connection between climate crisis and democracy. Even in the 21st century, there will be people that with a lot of money and a lot of power behind high walls will be able to continue to live as usual. But there will be hundreds of millions of people all over the world, mainly in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, that their agriculture will collapse. Their economy will, totally destroyed, and they will climb on these walls because people want to live. Now, with this situation, you can imagine how Western democracies will look like. You don't need to be, an expert in political science to realize that because we had a small refugee crisis in Europe back in 2014 to 2016, approximately 2 million refugees came to Europe from Afghanistan or Syria. And what happened in Europe, all over Europe, there was a political, and there is a political catastrophe, with just now the elections in Spain, Vox and the continuers of Franco, their power is much higher. In Italy, Giorgia Meloni, the leader of Fratelli d'Italia, which are the continuers of Mussolini, is the prime minister. And not only in Southern Europe, but also in Sweden, the neo-Nazis have 20% and they are part of the coalition. The True Finns in Finland, 21%, a huge force in inner Finnish politics all over Europe. So all this happened with 1.5 million refugees, a wave of fear from strangers, from foreigners, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, fascism. You can imagine how Europe will look like when there will be 150 million refugees coming there. That is the reason why the Secretary General of the UN actually said in the General Assembly of October 2019 that climate crisis is a challenge to democracy. It puts the very fabric, the very possibility of a democratic society into question, and that is the way we should see it. Third very important issue is, of course, the connection between climate crisis and environmental crisis and peace. In order to deal with the challenges of the 21st century, we have to find ways to end the conflicts that started in the 19th century. It is not very complicated to understand it. If we will not be able to find ways to overcome the present conflicts, which are real, and you cannot skip them, you have to solve them in order to unite against the huge crisis of climate and environment that threatens all of us, and we have no chance. So there is a deep inner connection between social issues, democracy, peace, and climate and environmental crisis. Now, what is happening now in Israel is, of course, something very, very important. I'm very much encouraged by this huge protest that I'm also involved in, that developed in Israel against the very dangerous moves of Israeli government, anti-democratic and very, very dangerous moves. However, everyone can realize that this vast movement is a very, varied one. There are many in this movement that just, long for for coming back to what we had 2 years ago. I'm very happy that these conservative forces are with us in this protest. I need them to be along with us. But I do not share their ideas. I think that this crisis is an opportunity to move forward to something more democratic, to open a new horizon of real democracy, and of course dealing with the Palestinian issue, which is something at the core, or at the deep core of the democratic crisis we have in Israel at the moment. And of course, the green issues, the real challenges of 21st century, that is something that we should put on the table. it is a challenge. It is a very, very complicated challenge to be together with people who are with us against the moves of the government, but are not with us on the issue of Israeli-Palestinian peace. They are not with us in the understanding that Israeli democracy should be totally different, much deeper and much truer than what we had before the crisis. And of course, understanding that the real challenge of society is to tackle the real issues and the real problems that humankind and Israel and Palestine deal with, which are environmental, climate, and so on.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dr. Orli Ronen of the Porter School, and also with a very personal connection to Noam Segal, which you may want to mention. I believe you were one of his teachers. I'd like to ask you, although you're not directly related to political science, but I think it has, it's a very interesting aspect of the Green movement in Israel. The fact that its political representation is extremely weak compared to other developed countries, where you can see all over, on the one hand you can see extreme right-wing parties growing, but you can also see green movements growing, countries like France and Germany. In Israel it has never worked. Why is that?
That's the question, and I wish Noam was here to answer it, because I think he would have several answers, or at least several points to discuss. But first I'd like to begin with saying how much I miss him. I think we miss him, and him and Vered, because the fact that we lost Noam, but also Vered is not part of our life, is not just as sad, but it is, you know, it is sad for me. I was at the Heschel Center. I'm one of the founders of the Heschel Center for Sustainability, as we know, and there's been an ongoing long connection between the Arava Institute and the Heschel Center. And as a matter of fact, Noam was more affiliated with the Arava Institute, so was Vered, but Vered also worked with me at the Heschel Center, so that's, I think that's part of the strong connection. And, but to your question, it's actually not a fair question, as I'm sitting right next to one of the only people who tried in his way, but there was a long, I do have to say, being part of the Israeli environmental movement, that there's been an ongoing discussion about this issue, whether the environmental movement should be a political movement, and if it's a political movement, what kind of politics? Should there be a party, a green party? Noam was actually very closely connected with the El Paran and the establishment of the Green Party, which was partially successful. And we won't go into that, it's too painful for a lot of people, but we did try.
I'm here to ask the painful question.
I'm not here to answer the painful and responsive.
That's your privilege.
So, but if we want to analyze or desiccate what really happened, so first of all, there are two, I think that you could say that there are two aspects, there are two arguments. One argument, and Dov can speak for himself, I don't need to speak for him, but one argument was that if you want to instigate change, you need to do it from the inside. You need to do it from inside politics. There is not much point in establishing an issue party that nobody is really related to, or there aren't that many people who are sympathetic to that issue, and so there's not going to be much chance that people will join it. So there are these two factions, and honestly, I'm not even sure at the time what I thought, because I think I voted for him and them together, so not too sure about that. But there's definitely an argument there. And I have to say that as far as the environmental movement is concerned, it's always been a discussion. Well, first of all, the discussion was, how political should we get? And also, should we be political at all? Because first and foremost, there is a danger in being too outstandingly political in Israel. Once you side with one side, you're definitely not siding with the other side. And you have to be honest. The government that's been in government for the last, what, 20?
Never mind.
Never
Don't
mind.
remind us.
That's also painful.
That's also painful, but a lot of the funding for the environmental movement does come from the government. And we won't go into that today, and you know
We'll
that
talk a
it's-
little bit about the
Okay.
civil society. I'll ask you about it in a moment. So you want to? No,
No, I'm
okay,
just
we're
saying
done with
these
the
are
political.
the different aspects, and it's not clear cut.
Thank you, Ashraf Ajami. How should I define him? Probably the best-known Palestinian to the Israeli public. Very vocal, very present in Israeli media, not just Israeli, but certainly in Israeli media. A partner and a friend for many years, and specifically now within the Track 2 Environmental Forum as one of the leaders of Damour. Obviously, Ashraf, I would like to ask you about the realities in Palestinian civil society and the role that civil society has on environmental or climate-related issues, considering that the branch of government is so crippled by the occupation and by the lack of real powers that the question remains, does the government, is it capable of doing something? And if not, is there a civil society that picks up the slack?
Thank you, Danny. Also, thanks for Arava Institute for this opportunity. Good evening, all. First of all, I want to add a population that suffer from the harmful of environment more than others, people under occupation. Well, you should mention it because we are, as Palestinian people, suffer from what is called environmental apartheid. I don't think that you heard about this apartheid, but we are in Palestine suffering from this kind of apartheid because our lands are confiscated by the Israeli authorities. We have no access to a huge amount of underground water aquifers. If it is in West Bank, even in area A and B, we are limited to access this water. Our lands also suffer from the Israeli, not just confiscated for illegal settlements, but also the settlers, by the protection of the government, cuts our trees. You think about our environment, if our trees are cut every year by settlers. So they punish us by destroying the agricultural lands. So this is a catastrophic result for the Palestinian environment. And also the problem that we cannot have any kind of access of Area C, which is 60% from the occupied territories, from the Palestinian territories. So we are prevented to access to our water, lands, resources. And if we are speaking about Gaza Strip is under siege and blockade for 16 years. So the pollution, the lack of electricity, lack of water, lack of a human condition is the situation in Gaza Strip. So the occupation is another dimension of what we suffer from. We are, like all other people, suffer from the climate change negative result or effects, but we are suffer more because of the occupation. About the civil society, you know that the current government in Israel destroyed the ability to have any kind of negotiations or talks between the two governments or the two leaderships. But the only maybe hopeful thing that we can see is the role of civil society. The civil society, the Palestinian civil society and the Israeli civil society have such kind of cooperation, and we as Damur for Community Development may be the best model of having this cooperation to in trying to solve environmental problems and issues, and we succeeded in solving some of these problems in maybe pilot solutions or models. In Gaza Strip, for example, we succeeded to solve problem of having a clean water by putting WaterGen machines which produce water from air. This is a very clean and quality water for people. We succeeded to put about 7 machines, WaterGen machines in Gaza Strip, in hospitals, municipalities, universities. So this is some kind of success of our cooperation. We also succeeded to put a set of wastewater treatment in Gaza Strip in Basin al-Kabira, which is also a model of having a solution for sewage or wastewater, especially in communities which aren't connected to a central infrastructure. We also try to solve the problem of the treated water in Ramallah and Beirut. We have a huge amount of treated water that is dropped to the valley. Now we succeeded from our cooperation with Arava and also the Water Authority to get the Israeli approval to have a pipeline from Ramallah, Al-Beirut to Jericho through Area C, which is not implied or understood in this current situation. But also this is some kind of success, and we are in a process to maybe apply some kinds of research to solve problems within Jordanian Valley with cooperation of many organizations, Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians, and international organizations.
Ashraf, you touched exactly on what I'd like to ask you as a brief follow-up question, and then we'll go in reverse order. we all know that cooperation between Israeli and Palestinian organizations is not always viewed favorably in Palestinian society. Do you see, how do people react to the things that you just mentioned, which we consider as successes, obviously, but how are they received in Palestinian society, briefly?
Yes, it is a very important question, mainly because we suffer from the anti-normalization movement. The anti-normalization movement, unfortunately, generalizes between cooperation between the civil society and the two sides and the cooperation or normalization with the Israeli government or authority. We differentiate between the official normalization and cooperation between governments, and this is not our issue. But the cooperation between the two civil societies, Israelis and Palestinians, are very essential to solve problems. And although this movement is very strong, but people accepted positively what we did, especially in Gaza Strip, which was a surprise, that people understood that the WaterGen machines came to Gaza Strip as a result of Israeli-Palestinian civil society cooperation. They received it in a positive way. And the same thing, I think, people who are exposed to our work, although they prevented to talk to us because we are normalizers, but after a while they understood that it is for the benefit of the population, for benefit of people. People understand very well their interest when they see a positive result of this cooperation.
Thank you, Ashraf. Orli, just quickly, we're sort of running out of time as we were expected to, and I don't want to attract anger of my friends, the organizers at the first panel, so we won't be much longer. Just quickly, regardless of the reasons and regrets about the political representation of the Green Movement, do you have a general feeling that civil society is capable of picking up the slack and having an influence on politicians from the outside?
No, I don't think that, well, to some extent, but I think mostly the challenge is for civil society to become political. For people who are involved in organizations, myself not a count, but for people to become politicians.
Problem is that everybody says that.
I know, to run for elections, and we have the local elections coming up. And unfortunately, we're sitting in a conference just about a week ago asking, okay, it was a conference about the green vote for the local elections, and everybody was very vocal, and we had tons of great ideas. But then the question was asked, okay, so who is going to run? 3 people. And I think that's part of the problem. I don't know that we've succeeded in that we've succeeded in understanding, that we definitely haven't succeeded in solving it. And I really, especially for women, there are 2 women mayors in Israel, I think 2, maybe 3 women mayors in Israel. My time is up. And so is the time for civil society to sit on the side. Maybe that's the answer.
Dov, very briefly, a word about the President's Forum, which is sort of on the border between establishment and civil society. Is it a good position to be in, or is it just a sort of greenwashing by the President?
Well, we will be judged by the results, you know. As the English say, the pudding is tasted by its whatever.
Eating.
Eating. Okay. So it's too early. It's too early to say shall it be a success. It is an interesting experience. It is really a very unique structure whereby people from academy, civil society, economic sector, workers organizations, and so on, coordinate with mainly the professional layer of government, both central and local. We do have our achievements, but when we look on the general picture, as Ashraf has said, the challenges ahead of us are much bigger, and we have to, meet huge issues, like the issue of injustice, occupation, structural issues of Israeli society. Very big challenge indeed. I would like to conclude with saying that while the multi-dimensional character of the situation may seem something that complicates things, it can be also a source of change. Because once things are stuck in the political level, you can try to reach them through climate issues. Once they are stuck on climate, you can reach them through social issues. So our understanding of the multidimensional nature of reality is not only something very important on the ontological sphere, but it is also very important strategically.
Thank you very much. I just conclude by saying that personally I think that political dimension is badly needed, be it through an individual party or through infiltration of existing parties by devoted people. But that on the other hand, as far as Palestinian-Israeli cooperation goes, I think this is definitely, as things stand today, an opportunity for organizations like ours, and I'm happy that we can contribute something to that effort. Thank you, Dr. Ronen, Dov Khenin, Ashraf Ajami, thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, because we believe that the environment can't wait for peace between Palestinians and Israelis, and because we believe that working together on environmental issues builds an opportunity for relationships and trust building in the future, the Arava Institute, together with our partners, Demore for Community Development, have been working for the past 6 years advancing cross-border environmental cooperation in spite of the political conflict. And we've done this in the West Bank, we've done this in Gaza, as Ashraf has mentioned, a number of initiatives, a number of successes around water, energy, food security. Looking to the future, we believe that over the next 5 years, our goal now is to take some of these successes and replicate them and scale them up, and to engage even deeper with the governments in the region, despite the challenges that we face and the political challenges. We believe that we can push for more cooperation between Palestine and Israel on these essential issues, because by doing so, we are improving the lives of people, and we are offering some kind of hope to the population. And what I'd like to present to you now is a video. Hope I can do this. Can someone operate this? Yeah. Our partners, Demore, have led this initiative that Ashraf mentioned, WaterGen, water generators, machines that take water from the humidity in the atmosphere, turning it into high-quality drinking water. And they've just produced a video on this joint project that we worked on together, the Arava Institute, supported by the Friends of the Arava Institute and a number of donors who have supported this project over the past few years. And we're going to show this video now.
Gaza Strip is a very poor society because of the Israeli siege, and also it suffers from many problems: the lack of electricity, lack of clean water for drinking and for human using. Our purpose is to supply WaterGen machines to give people clean water for using, for drinking, for example, and also for medical uses because of a lack of clean water. This project is valuable because it provides some kind of solutions to the huge problem of a lack of water in Gaza Strip, especially clean water.
We approached Damour and asked them to help in solving the problem of potable water in the university. So they immediately responded by providing us with this excellent machine, which brings water from the air and supplies the majority of the university population with excellent fresh water.
تمكنا من توفير مياه الشرب الصالحة المحلاة النقية لكافة المستفيدين من برامج جمعية مبرد فلسطين للرعاية، حيث ساهم هذا المشروع في توفير مياه الشرب لهؤلاء الأطفال، كما يمكن استخدام هذه المياه المقطرة في تعقيم الأدوات الطبية المستخدمة في عملية التمريض لهؤلاء المستفيدين.
People who got these machines now are enjoying of the clean water. If they are municipalities or hospitals or even the university and other associations, they are now in a situation that they get clean water, they can use it freely.
استطعنا عن طريق مؤسسة دامور أن توفر لنا جهاز تقطير مياه، فعن طريق توفير هذه المياه الصالحة للشرب والمياه المقطرة لصالح المختبر لصالح غرف العمليات الجراحية، استطعنا أن نقدم الخدمة لشريحة كبيرة من المجتمع الفلسطيني، هي شريحة كبار السن وكذلك شريحة المرضى الذين يحتاجون إلى التأهيل الطبي الشامل.
We hope to bring more and more WaterGen machines and to put it in many public places like universities, schools, municipalities, and other associations. People are in need of clean water. We also appreciate and gratitude for Arava Institute, our partner from the Israeli side, which helped us to get donation and to get these WaterGen machines and to provide the associations in Gaza Strip with these machines.
Oh, wow. No, we need the slideshow.
No, the lights.
Right. Good. Okay, first of all, I just turned off a video on an Apple computer, and I think that deserves a bit of well done from me. So first of all, I think that's fantastic. Congratulations, Ashraf, Tahani, all of Damor. That's a great video. I again want to thank the friends of the Arava Institute, our donors, and especially WaterGen, an Israeli company. The founder and owner, Dr. Michael Merashvili, donates half of each WaterGen machine to this project, and I want to thank him. I now would like to introduce two of my friends and colleagues, Professor Jim Paul and Dr. Michael Gilmont from the Oxford Martin School. The Oxford Martin School at Oxford University has been a partner with the Arava Institute and Damor for the past 4 or 5 years, trying to get the big picture of our region, looking at water, energy, and how it's possible for this region to cooperate on these two basic issues. So I'm going to invite Jim and Michael up for the presentation, and you can turn on the slideshow on the Apple computer.
Well, good evening, everyone, and it's a great honor to be here, to, above all, pay tribute again to Noam Segal, and look back at some of what we've been doing in collaboration with our partners in the Arava Institute, Damor, the Track 2 Environmental Diplomacy Program. Noam was a real inspiration to this program on water, energy, climate, the environment in this part of the world. Would he be satisfied with where we've got to so far? Well, we've worked hard. Notwithstanding COVID, which made collaboration and meeting face-to-face very, very difficult, we have, I think, and we'll say a little bit more in a moment about the analysis that we've assembled. Some of you may have seen some versions of this previously, but we've pressed on and continued with this analysis, constructing systems analysis of energy and water in the region. That too has taken a long time, I think, partly, and we recognize this at the outset because it illustrates how data itself is highly politicized. It's protected, it's used as for political means, it's a symbol of sovereignty. But we've made some progress even with that. And we've talked a lot, which I think is intrinsically a good thing. We've met in Cyprus twice this year. In Cyprus, as ever, we had Palestinians, Israelis, Jordanians, and many other people around the table. And I think the discourse had moved on in the sense that we were talking more specifically about initiatives, potential initiatives in relation to renewable energy in Area C around Gaza, major energy investments in Jordan, and about wastewater treatment. And I think to everyone's surprise in such a forum, the topic of Article 40 of the Oslo Accords came up in open discussion as a point which clearly requires revisiting after all of these years. However, I know would have told us that this is a story that never ends. This is a humbling part of the world in that sense, and an infuriating part of the world in the sense that many enduring things are not apparently changing. But in some senses, things do change. In Tareq's introduction at the beginning, we were reminded about the dramatic changes from climate change, and that is, I think, changing the debate. And meanwhile, technology is changing at an extraordinary rate as well. We've just seen the impacts of technology on desalination from water vapor. We're all familiar with the scale of desalination which is taking place in Israel and around the world at the moment. The technologies of wastewater treatment, the potential and indeed the use of sensing technologies, artificial intelligence to understand aspects of the aquatic environment which previously eluded us. And technology is changing dramatically in relation to energy as well. Renewable energy generation, energy storage, hydrogen. Who imagined that that little atom would be causing so much excitement? And the other driver of change is climate targets themselves. So that brings these two things together, the crisis of climate change and the need to do something about it. And so climate targets are really kind of focusing on the future in a way that I think was possibly unusual in some senses up to that point. So let me give a quick update of where we've got to in that space. There are some, again, very familiar issues here. I'd love to say something more specific about Israel's 2050 net zero commitment, but there is a 2030 30% carbon target and similar targets in Jordan and by the Palestinian Authority. And yet, of course, we recognize in particular the dramatically unreliable and unequal access amongst the Palestinians. And yet, if we look at nature, we see this, this fascinating picture of solar potential on the left. I was a bit disappointed as I flew into Tel Aviv this afternoon that this is obviously not a good day for solar energy. And there are many days like that, whereas if one looks eastwards, there's much greater solar potential and the wind potential in the region, and that wind potential which is at least some of the time out of sync, so complements the nighttime drops in solar generation, is an extremely potent natural resource which the Jordanians above all in this region have at their disposal. So in order to analyze what actually, as soon as you start looking at that degree of variability, you need to bring in battery storage, you need to bring in the cost of transmission. We constructed a new simulation model in a modeling system called PIPESA, which some of you may be familiar with, of the entire generation and transmission system in the region. And this is a bit of an update from people who've seen versions of this talk before, in the sense that we're now looking at entire decarbonisation pathways through to 2050. So this is an optimization of what we might do with energy right the way through to 2050, including an increasing element of self-sufficiency for the Palestinians. We look at two scenarios, a non-cooperation energy scenario, which basically has the same amount of transboundary energy transfers as exist at the moment, and a cooperation scenario which brings in more transboundary transfers if they are economically efficient. What we find, the dashed boxes here, is that they are indeed significantly economically efficient, and for the most part they're efficient because they enable that wind energy resource in Jordan, as well as the larger areas for solar energy to be exploited. So this graph here, the top panel is the no cooperation scenario through to 2050. This is energy generation within the region, and the lower panel is the cooperation scenario. You can see all of those numbers going up a lot. That means that that reflects the increasing population and the increasing energy use, particularly amongst the Palestinians and Jordanians, to meet their energy needs. You see, with some relief, the total phasing out of coal and gas also no longer being part of the picture by 2050, which may be a surprising piece of news for some people in this region. And in the lower panel, much more of the pink, which represents transboundary transfers, in particular between Jordan and Israel, and much more exploitation of that valuable wind resource which is in Jordan. Here we're looking at the amounts of transboundary transfer from the four entities to the other four. So the left is more or less a description of the status quo, whereas with the main transfer being from Israel into the West Bank, whereas if we allow cooperation, there would be a lot more transmission from Jordan into Israel. That's definitely efficient. More from Jordan also into the West Bank, practically tripling of the amount of energy going into the West Bank. So that's a summary of where we've got to. The lesson around cooperation is clear. Exactly. I mean, there are many complications with that, but you're all familiar with at least initial proposals in relation to the Prosperity Project. Whether that is the place to start or the right thing to start with is debatable. But the fact that there is this matching of technology, a climate imperative, and a benefit of cooperation, which also brings in the Palestinians, is a message that is coming from this research, which I hope that Noam would have been pleased to see. I'll hand over to my colleague Michael Gilmont.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you to our host, the Arava Institute, and it's a pleasure to be here presenting some of the work on water, and also remembering and acknowledging Noam's absolutely irreplaceable role in facilitating the initiation of all of this. I just wanted to present a brief sort of review of the work and the analysis we've been doing, which have been charting recent history of water resource development and use and future trajectories through to 2040, the implications of that around human needs of water, climate resilience, and the role of transboundary cooperation in potentially in a big way alleviating some of the major challenges that exist through to 2040 and beyond. So a good chunk of my work on recent years has been trying to assemble a comparable and coherent set of data of water resources in the region, from the national scale upscaling to the regional. And we now have three sets of data. We have supply and demand, supply being on the left-hand side of each bar, demand being the right-hand, split primarily into domestic and agricultural. We can see in the case of Israel, we've got a spot year of 2019, but then demand through to 2030, 2040 is obviously growing. Supply comfortably is, or potential supply is comfortably outstripping demand, in part due to Israel's re-evaluation a couple of years ago in 2018 of future desal capacity vis-a-vis its own population demand, climate change, and also the likely need of its neighbours. Moving on to Jordan, this is based on the very recently published 2040 water plan. We see a quite severe trend the other way. Supply and demand are growing, but demand is outstripping planned supply. I know that includes the provisional prosperity blue values of desal from Israel, so obviously if that doesn't go ahead, then the situation is even more severe. And then finally, West Bank and Gaza. This is not official data. This is sort of inspired by our understanding of what the direction things are going in, but these numbers are not in any way reflective of what might be officially published later in the year. They're extrapolations courtesy of myself, inspired by experts. What we see is demand is growing, demand and supply are growing in both locations. There is likely to be a balance between supply and demand. Obviously, demand is being throttled in terms of theoretical demand versus what is actually practically achievable. What we also see is an increasing reliance on larger volumes of water being imported from Israel, larger volumes of treated wastewater, and in the case of Gaza, very much a reduction in offtake from the environment, from the degraded groundwater, and the need to replace that lost capacity, especially through imports and potentially desalination. The amount of desal developed will impact the amount of imports required. So what that scales to down at a personal level is actually for West Bank, Gaza and Jordan, really a static allocation of cubic meters per capita per year of about 40, which is 100 litres per person per day, which is WHO minima. And for Israel, a decline on, I guess, what has been a peak of nearly 100 cubic meters per capita per year. So a lot of the growth in the domestic sector is sort of running to stay still in terms of population growth. Interestingly, what this also shows in terms of official planning or projections is that there is a desire in all jurisdictions to stay within natural resource limits, and indeed declining natural resource limits. We've got a review of available natural resources in both Jordan and Israel and Palestine, using data plus or minus year 2000, subtracting 10% rather crudely for climate change, and comfortably by 2040, the total natural offtake more or less sits at that 10% climate change target. It exceeds it 2030, so there's a lot of work to do between 2030 and 2040. This also assumes, this potentially rosy picture in terms of natural resources, assumes that every element of every national plan that is being considered is implemented, and we know from history that things happening on time, let alone happening at all in this region, is far from a guaranteed outcome. But it does illustrate the real fruits that could be achieved if things happen, and the risks that could be achieved if they don't. So this is sort of the regional picture, including Jordan's deficit, the difference potentially between what Jordan and Palestine will want from Israel versus most recent Israeli policy on what Israel's thinking it will supply. For both Jordan and Palestine, there's a second and third bars. We see a sort of total regional deficit of around 750 million cubic metres by 2040. If we look at introducing capacity around 200 million cubes of desal around Prosperity Blue, that plugs a fair bit of the gap. If we incorporate a good chunk of Israel's potential contingency desal, that plugs a further gap. If we scenario 7% net reuse of domestic water as treated wastewater in agriculture, that plugs another 138. And finally, if we slightly tweak the growth in agriculture in both Palestine and Jordan, we get further 48.2, and that miraculously, by the laws of clever maths, plugs the gap. There'd also definitely be room in there for Israel's agricultural use to be potentially tempered, especially when looking at demographic and economic changes in Israel and the implications that might have for the future agricultural sector. So where does this leave us? I think national plans are in place to facilitate regional sustainability, but they need to actually be allowed to achieve, to happen. Failure to achieve them will either result in unsustainable water use and or undersupply of water to populations. We see there is regional capacity and solutions to reduce the scale of the challenges that individual countries face. For example, Jordan's 600 million cube shortfall can be addressed through regional adjustments and increased sharing from Israel. But steps need to be taken now to build in that additional capacity, especially if we're talking about increased wastewater use and desal capacity as well, the lead time to build a desal plant, the significant amounts of planning, regulation, resource development to develop truly wastewater facilities. Alberia is a huge example the Arava has been very heavily involved in. That needs to start happening now. It can't be left until it was needed 10 years ago. And I think it's in the interest of all parties to support each other in actually facilitating this national and regional action, because they will all benefit from increased resource resilience and water sustainability. And the work we've been trying to do at Oxford through this data analysis and building these this set of numbers, it has involved bringing together professionals to explore new solution spaces, to understand each other's plans, aspirations, and their role in meeting that. And we hope, if we have the opportunity to continue with this, that continued work will really build a case for action and establish mechanisms for cross-border support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the next panel is on women, democracy, and security. And this is a panel which was inspired by Dr. Deborah Sandler. Unfortunately, Deborah was going to moderate it. Unfortunately, she is ill and she couldn't come tonight. So stepping in her place is my colleague, Evie Levitin-Loudon. And she's going to, she was supposed to host 3 panelists, 2 of whom are not going to be here tonight. One of them is being replaced graciously. We were lucky enough to have Dr. Maya Negev join us to replace Shira Efron. Dr. Shira Efron couldn't make it. So Maya, and
the last one standing.
And the only one who's in the original panel is Tahani, who just made it from Gaza. So.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. So this is slightly last minute, as David introduced. For those of you who don't know, I'm Evie Levitin-Lawton. I'm the manager of the Track 2 Environmental Forum, and I'm very glad to be here with you all this evening. And although we were expecting Sally Abed to be here as well with us, I'm very grateful for our lovely 2 panelists who were able to be here, and it gives us some more time with them, which is wonderful. So we have Tahani Abu Daka here with us from Damor for Community Development, our partners on Track 2 Environmental Forum. Just to give you, and also we have Dr. Maya Negev with us. And to give you a kind of a brief introduction, their CVs are very extensive. I'm not going to cover it all. But Tahani is first and foremost, sees herself as a women's activist and advocate. She's the former youth and sport and culture minister in the PA. the beginning of her life, your main struggle was freedom, then moved on to community work and development, and now the main focus for Tahani is the struggle around climate change. She joined the Damour Community Development Board. She's on our joint implication committee for the implementation committee for the Arava, for the Track to Environmental Forum, and founded a company for renewable energy, Gaza Life Power. Thank you for being here with us. And we have Dr. Maya Negev, the alum. She's also an alum of the Arava Institute from 2004-5, and taught the eco-health at Arava Institute, is on the board of the Institute for the past 10 years, faculty member of the School of Public Health at the University of Haifa, where she also heads the Health Systems Policy and Administration Program, and conducts research on climate change and public health. So we are here today to talk about, we're here to talk about democracy and sustainability, but this panel focusing on gender, women and climate change, and where women's place is in this matrix of democracy and climate. The field is a very wide one and there's lots to say. I would like to ask Maya if you would give us an introduction, how these two interrelate. You have it.
Thank you. Good
Yeah.
evening, Tov, Sarha. Thank you for the invitation. Okay. It's a great honor to be here with you on the panel. And I would like to start with just a few words about Noam, whom I miss very much. And first time I met Noam was on the grass at the Arava Institute over 20 years ago when he was an alum coming to visit and I was a student. And since our first interaction, every interaction that I had with Noam was inspiring. He always had very innovative and creative and intelligent thinking. And every time I met him, whether by chance at a conference, or if we had coffee, or even if I heard him interviewing on the radio, it was always thought-provoking. And he still continues to inspire me. Noam was in one person, science, policy, and society. This is quite incredible. He was really an interference and interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary person who was doing excellent science, but also working hard to do excellent politics and communications and media. He left a very important heritage that continues to influence us all. Okay, so moving on to climate, gender, and the Middle East. Well, climate is the biggest crisis that we are facing in the 21st century. And we are already in the midst of it, and everybody in this room knows it. Climate, as we've already heard by Dov, impacts some more than others. And of course, that people who are more vulnerable, people who live under occupation, people who live in poverty, and also women, are more vulnerable to climate change and are impacted stronger. Before talking about the Middle East, I'd like to just give one example from when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and it showed us how in disasters women are more vulnerable. The white, wealthy families, often with mother and father households, were able to escape and evacuate. And the inner city, single mom, Afro-American women with their children who did not have the resources or the private cars to evacuate were hit the hardest. And this is just one example of how women can be more vulnerable. Most of the people who live in poverty in the world are women, and poverty is great exacerbation of climate vulnerability. If you look at the Middle East is a climate hotspot. It's warming faster than the global average, or already 1.5 degree hotter. Maybe doesn't sound so much if you can turn the air conditioner 1.5 degree colder. But we have to remember the inequality that we have in this region. Many people, especially in Israel, the majority have, for example, air conditioners. So when a heat wave comes, and heat waves are one of the greatest climate risks that we are facing, people can turn on the AC, but many people in the world, in this region, and of course mainly in Palestine, and in Jordan as well, and also people living in poverty in Israel, do not have this protection, do not have means to evacuate if there is an extreme event such as, a wildfire or a storm, or if their house is affected by sea level rise. Women are also physically more vulnerable. The mortality among women is higher. Pregnant women are more vulnerable. Even embryos during pregnancy are impacted by climate change, and there are negative birth outcomes for babies that experience heat wave in the womb. We also know that climate change increases domestic violence and murder of women, and we see it everywhere in the world, from India to Spain to Australia. So women are more vulnerable in that respect. Women are more vulnerable in shelters if there is an extreme event than when they evacuated. And also, if we look at the long-term changes of the weather, not just the extreme events, not just the floods and storms, etc. When it gets hotter and drier, women use public transport more, so they are more exposed to climate. Women spend more time with their children outdoors, so again, they are more exposed to climate hazards. They use the city in ways that expose them more. And extreme events in climate change can also affect their access to mother and child health care and to healthcare in general. I think I'll end here for now.
Thank you very much. I think that gives us a very comprehensive idea of why women and why climate is a gendered issue as well. Tahani, can you tell us a little bit about women in Gaza and issues related to public health, energy, water, solid waste?
I think the main person or main party in the community who can work for climate change is a woman. If the woman has awareness about the climate change, she will work to save the environmental, as the solid waste, the separation, how to use the energy at home, how to use the water, everything that women can participate in. For that, our role in Gaza to build awareness among women. But there is a lot if the women want to contribute in to the work of environmental projects. She has a lot of challenges to work. The first, the community itself. The second, the occupation and freedom. The third, the situation and economic situation in Gaza Strip. I will start about the occupation freedom. The women or gender, we said that the women and men, they are responsible, but about what happened in the environmental disaster with climate change. But if we start in Gaza, we as a women want to start to work and to solve this problem, there is difficulties. The first thing is the occupation. I will give you an example, and maybe from which is I suffer from it just today and every day, not myself, and also the women in Gaza Strip. Me as a Tahani Abu Dakka, came from the village, and poor village, not modern village. I get my freedom from the community. I can move everywhere. I build my career. I get very high positions in Palestine, and also I get the loyalty from my community. I get the respect from them. Nobody can stop me to do anything I want to do. The most of the time they push me to do. But in the end, today when I come to this meeting, example, I have to pass from areas to come here. I have permit. I spent 3 hours for nothing in the border. For nothing, okay? Sit down at a chair. I tell them I have a conference. I have to be there because there is a meeting. I have to be there at 3. Maybe half hour before 3, they told me leave. All the time when I try to leave Gaza, it's happening. I'm traveling also to Jordan. Multi-time I lose my plane because I want to go to participate or contribute in conference or in workshop or something like this. 2 months ago, maybe I lost very important meeting with the DFC head of the DFC. It's a big financing body in America. Will finance our project to build solar field, and they don't allow me to leave Gaza, and I lost this meeting. This is our life, which just means that if we don't have our freedom, then we will lose the movement, then we couldn't work. And another thing also, okay, now there is a lot of a problem in Gaza. The first one, the Southwest, which is make a disaster in Gaza, around 2,000, between 1,500 ton to 2,000 per day, which is not healthy landfill, and also there is millions of cubic meters per day of the storage, and you know that we have a salty water. There is a lack of water. A lot of problems. It's now in Gaza. The most of the sewage they pump it to the sea, and there's a pollution in the sea. It's come to Israel and Palestine. We try during with the help of the international or European countries to build wastewater treatment plant. We built 3 wastewater treatment plants. But when they build it, they don't think about a lot of things around it because the communities not contribute to put the solution and other things. They have problems now with the treated water, how they can use this treated water because they didn't build awareness among the community to use this treated water and what the kind of agriculture we can use it for this treated water. The second thing, 150 ton per day, or until maybe 200 ton per day from the sludge, which is they don't know what to do with the sludge, and the sludge starts to be a disaster. There is a river of sludge surround the landfill, and it's a big disaster problem for the Israelis and Palestinians because the landfill in the border. Until now, they don't find the international organization, which is they donate this wastewater treatment plant. Until now, they didn't find the solution for the sludge. About the solid waste, I said also there is a huge number of solid waste and municipal waste. When we try, we look at around us. When we try, we will find technology to help us to solve this problem and to make energy from this problem. 7 months I applied to the Israeli side. I want to bring the technology to Palestine and to Gaza. We need approval because we couldn't bring anything to our country until they have the approval from Israel. Until now, they didn't give me the approval for that. Also, we are waiting until they have. And also about Area C, which is we couldn't use the Area C. We could use the buffer zone in Gaza to use it for environmental project as solar energy or to build a healthy landfill and to use the treated water example to farm animals' food or trees or something like this. This is the most of the what is called the restriction we have it for that we couldn't. But in the end, there is a women, there is a thinking, there is a active women which they are working every day for that. I will give good example. Also, I started with a very bad. There is a village called Basin al-Kabira. When I visit the municipality of Basin, I discovered that the municipality of Basin, they include the women and youth in their strategic plan and in their old activity, in the evaluation of the activities, in the evaluation of the project. They established women by help of Damour and Arava Institute, Women Environmental Forum. When we sit with the women, always they're thinking about the environmental problem. They are asking for separation of the solid waste, recycling of solid waste, healthy landfill. They ask for how to use the plastic, how to use the clothes in the which is in the solid waste. And also they were thinking about food security. Example, they asked us for training how we can plant food with the salty water and the tired land because of the salty water, how we can develop our farmers, how we can produce food for our people. And they also asked about energy. They told us that all our projects, many projects which is we own it as a women, as a food processing or freezing for food or something like this, stopped because there is no electricity. If we want to use the electricity from the generators, we have to pay 4 shekels for each kilowatt, which will make their products very expensive. Then we need solar energy. We need you to help us to build solar energy, and we will start to open our work again. When we discuss also with the youth, boys and girls, also they raise the same problems, and they ask the municipality to put water, wastewater, energy in their strategy, which is mean that if we include women and youth in our own. When we build our strategy, of course, they will look at everything and they will help and contribute for this project to be successful. In Gaza also we have problems that because of there is no electricity. We have 8-hour electricity, 8 hours on and 8 hours off. When we have 8 hours off, the people they use the diesel generators to
Let me just stop you there. We'll come back to this. It's very important. I think it's really important. You've touched on also how how the problem affects women in very clear ways, but also how women can be part of the solution. And I think that's really important. I just wanted to ask Maya if you have. Tahani touched on many of the aspects of women and public health and in terms of the sludge and all of these other things and how they can affect. Do you want to add to that something?
Maybe indirectly. So let me touch on women as a part of the solution and maybe take it from there. Well, you know, the face of the climate movement is a young woman, Greta Thunberg, a Swedish girl, now young woman, who really took off the masks of the world's politicians and industry regarding climate change. When she traveled to climate conventions, to international climate conventions, sorry, I asked David to turn off the air conditioner because it's freezing and save some greenhouse gases.
Maybe not off.
Thank you,
just
David.
down.
Yeah, just a couple of degrees up. So I think, you know, Greta used to travel to climate conventions by boat and not by polluting airplanes. The last climate convention, which was in Sharm el-Sheikh, was the biggest one with 40,000 people. It was really a climate festival from all over the world. She didn't come because she only had 3 words to say about it: blah, blah, blah. And I think she's a very courageous young woman who is facing a very masculine, very man world of politicians, of country leaders who are mainly men, of the oil and gas and coal industry, who is mainly dominated by men, an industry that is among 50 companies of energy production from these fossil fuel sources that is responsible for about almost half of the greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that she's an example and an inspiration. We have a lot of female and male, by the way, inspiration in the climate scene also in our region. If I just focus on Israel for 1 second, the current Minister of Environmental Protection, who I strongly disagree with politically, Idit Silman, he's a woman, and her predecessor, Tamar Zandberg from the left Peretz party, who is not currently in Knesset, is also a woman, and these 2 women don't have much in common, but they've both done more than anybody in Israeli governments to progress a climate bill, climate act. Did they succeed? No. Did the law pass? No. Was it budgeted? No. But they definitely put it on the government agenda, the government table, and they've made progress. And it's very fortunate that until this day in Israel, climate is politically neutral. If we look at the US, climate is a left-right issue, and I think that it's very harmful for climate when it becomes a left-right or a male-female issue. In Israel, it's really politically neutral to a large extent. It's also almost non-existent in politics. It's not talked about by political leaders, either in government or in local government. But I think that we are seeing more people, including women, in local authorities who are leading climate mitigation and climate adaptation across the board, both in Jewish and Arab towns in Israel. And we are seeing a lot of alumni of the Arava Institute taking leading positions in climate action in Israel, both in local government and in NGOs, in many projects. So we have good examples of women who are making a change. For example, just to mention a few alumni, Ala Obed, who is turning Shefa'am, or the city of Shefa'am, into the first Arab city who has an adaptation plan. Zubada Uzeri, also alumni of the Arava Institute, who is at the Israel the New Israel Fund doing this work, Manar Saraya, another alum who is on the Green Building Council, some male as well, such as Farid Mohammed, my dear friend who is here in the audience, and also some NGOs, both environmental and feminist NGOs in Israel that are doing climate action, that are building networks and collaborations, cross-cultural, cross-borders, and giving us some hope.
Thank you very much. We are kind of out of time, but I would like to ask if you have any final comments on that. Tahani, any final remarks on the subject? Although I feel like we have covered a lot here.
Maybe I will speak about
Take this one.
about the cooperation and democracy in the field of climate change. I think in environmental issues and to work for climate change, the cooperation is very important. We can exchange ideas, solutions, technologies. We can facilitate the things to us, to each other. I will give example, a partnership with Arava Institute. When we have problems, when the community or women raise problems, we come and discuss with them, we find together the solution, and after that we can find fund for these solutions, and after that they help us to facilitate the movement for us and for also the technologies or the devices which is we want to bring it to Gaza, which is mean that it's a very important. The second thing is that the democracy. If there is no democracy and election and quota for women to be in the decision-making positions, I think we will miss a lot of support for environmental project or raise environmental problem, because the women to be in the decision-making position, it will help a lot in this field.
Thank you very much to both of you, Dr. Maya Negev, Tahani Abu Dak. I think that was an excellent point to end on. Thank you.
Thank you all. And by the way, we are running Tahani Abu Daka for president of the Palestinian Authority. We're starting the campaign now. Maya Negev for Sarata Briut. Okay, to introduce our final speaker, I'm going to invite my friend, Dr. Shaddad Attili, who former minister for the Palestinian Water Authority and currently advisor to Palestinian Authority negotiations, and now the chair. Is that your title? Chair of the Water Bank, International Water.
The Secretary General.
Secretary General. Sorry. Okay.
Well, thank you, David, and good evening to you all. I'm asked to introduce His Excellency, our distinguished keynote speaker for tonight. He's the one who's going to tell us where we are heading, because we are too much really involved from the inside, so we cannot see where are we heading. So our distinguished ambassador, Dennis Ross, he's seeing us from outside. He's going to tell us where Israel is heading, because we are seeing you demonstrating each Saturday. Where are we heading? Because we lost any hope of two-state solution, because you work a lot on the peace process and you shaped the Oslo Accord and you work on many other accords. Okay, so you are very much involved, sir, and we would like really to hear where are we heading, and if the two-state solution collapses, so what's the alternative? And where's our region heading? And with all what we hear as Arava Damur, we are very heavily involved in energy, food, water nexus, and we call this the cross-boundary cooperation. So what about the regional cooperation? Whether we like each other or not, it's a must that we are working together addressing the climate change. addressing the water scarcity, the food, and all this stuff. Without any further ado, our keynote speaker, who gonna tell us and who gonna bring some answer, please, because we really enjoy just to know where are we going. So please, and we are all
No pressure then.
Yes. Thank you.
So yeah, no pressure. You know, listening to the kind of problems we see associated with climate change, you're talking about what's going on in Gaza, or you're talking about how women are, and those who are least equipped to deal with climate change are the ones who suffer the most from the consequences of it. You know, I couldn't help but sort of think as I was listening to you, you know, if you take a step back, I don't know how many of you have seen some of the disaster movies like Armageddon or Asteroid. You would see these movies, and what does it say? It says the world will come together when we face these colossal challenges that confront everybody the same way. Hasn't happened, has it? I mean, think about the fact that if there is one issue where this should have been the case, climate change is it, right? You were talking about what went on at the COP, and you were describing that mostly what they did was blah blah. Think about the fact that we have the nations of the world having committed themselves to ensure that global warming and climate change won't produce an increase in temperatures over 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. Okay? There is almost no country or region right now that is meeting its current targets. Now those targets are to limit the increase in temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Let's take a step back. Right now, the climate has changed, has increased. We've seen the level of temperature rise 1.1 degrees Celsius. And what do we experience with that? We're experiencing unbelievable floods, unbelievable droughts. I grew up in California where there used to be a fire season only in the summer. Now the fire season is year-round. I grew up in a place where there were never brownouts. Now there are brownouts. This is in California, the United States of America. We look at droughts in Africa that basically have ended the ability to produce farming and agriculture. It produces huge numbers of refugees. The war in Syria, mostly Bashar al-Assad is mostly responsible for it, but there was a drought there that moved 1.5 million people out of the countryside, out of farming, to cities that could not absorb them. We are seeing already the consequences of climate change well before we get close to the 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. And yet that hasn't been enough to motivate the international community, even though there are mechanisms designed to get everyone to be committed to somehow control this, to meet the targets, and yet no one is meeting the targets. There is this kind of hope out there that technology will solve the problem, right? That we will find that green hydrogen will be able to produce it at scale. And the energy that's required to produce it, which right now is extremely high, not to produce it at scale, will itself not add to the problem. There is this hope somehow that there'll be what we call a kind of silver bullet, a magic bullet, that will solve this. And maybe it will. Maybe we'll find that we'll be able to do carbon capture in a way that we haven't been able to do it yet. Maybe there will be a breakthrough on green hydrogen. Maybe we will see what's known as high voltage direct current, which allows you to transmit renewable energy from solar and wind thousands of miles, which you couldn't do before. You still, when you produce that, you still require a space to be able to store it. So maybe all these things will come together, but I don't know that we should count on any of that. What we need to count on is the fact that You know, there will be responsible leadership in different places that will produce the kinds of hard choices that are going to be required over time. So, how does that relate to the questions that you were posing? I thought you'd ask that. I want you to think about the fact that, first of all, the Arava Institute and Damur, what are you doing? You are dealing with what are profound water security related issues connected to climate change, food security issues that grow out of the water problem. You are producing practical cooperation on the ground. You know, one of the interesting things about climate change, my friend Tom Friedman likes to say that Mother Nature is governed solely by physics, biology, and chemistry. Mother Nature doesn't care about your ideology. Mother Nature doesn't care about the arguments you make. Mother Nature doesn't care about who's right and who's wrong in the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. You know, climate change respects no borders. It affects everybody. It's true, those who have means are more capable of dealing with it. And what you were describing about the consequences of those who are least capable of dealing with it, paying the worst possible price for it. So what is required is take a practical approach and build from the ground up. And that's what you've been doing. You know, it's in a lot of ways what is required is to take the projects that you're engaged in and make them a model. You need to give them a great deal of exposure, because you need to see that those who may disagree on how we're going to resolve the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians are still aware of their common humanity, and because they're aware of their common humanity, they do practical things to deal with what are challenges for both. Honey, when you talk about the water problems or sewage problems in Gaza, is Israel immune to that? The sewage goes out into the Mediterranean, and which way does it flow? It flows right to the Israeli beaches. So it's not as if Israel can remove itself from that. It's not as if it has no stake in that. It has a stake in that. So I look at what you're doing from the standpoint of there's a need to respond first and foremost to what are very practical issues, whether it's water availability, whether it's the issue of how you sustain and build water security, which relates to how you produce food security. What you're doing is necessary, even if there wasn't a conflict. The fact that there is a conflict, you're sort of saying, we can't solve that, but we can deal with this. So from my standpoint, when you build a model that has implications for others internationally on the issue of how to cope with the challenges of climate change. But of course I see something else. I see it as a building block towards reducing the nature of this conflict and then ending this conflict. Now, why do I see it that way? Well, first, I'm prone to see it that way because, you know, I have this instinct that says, all right, there's always something that you have to be able to do. You don't wring your hands and give up. I look at it that way because I'm looking at where we are in terms of conflict resolution between Israelis and Palestinians. I have been working on this, I hate to say, for 40 years. And it may surprise you for me to say, I don't think we've ever been at a lower ebb than we are today. The Second Intifada was much worse in terms of the level of violence, but it wasn't much worse in terms of the level of complete hopelessness. No one believes that this is a conflict that can be solved any longer. I mean, I look at the polling, you know, on both sides, by the way. There used to be majorities that favored a two-state outcome. Now that's not the case anymore. Is it because both sides said, oh, we really didn't believe in it to begin with? No, it's because it seems so implausible. Why invest in it emotionally? Why invest in something that you think is never going to happen? That's why the numbers have dropped so much. So one of the challenges is how do you begin to restore faith? How do you begin to restore a sense of possibility? We can't do it at the political level right now. We have an Israeli government that is not capable of negotiating a political settlement with the Palestinians. But we have a split on the Palestinian side between Hamas and Fatah and the PA. They're also not capable of negotiating an outcome. So this is not a case where one side bears all the responsibility. Those who say, let's go negotiate, I can tell you, and I'm a negotiator, I'm a mediator. I wouldn't bring the parties together today. The first thing you do as a mediator is you find where's the common ground. There is no common ground between the two sides as it relates to the political issues. It doesn't mean there couldn't be common ground for some practical projects. There can be common ground. And here again, that's what you're demonstrating. There's a common ground because there's a common need. You can't wish away what is happening in terms of climate change. In Israel, you know, Ehud Barak likes to talk about an oasis in the jungle. Well, I got news for everybody. You know, you can't survive alone in this region if everybody else in this region is going to be subject to the consequences of climate change. So Israel has a huge stake in trying to deal with this, and others have a huge stake in cooperating with the Israelis. So when I look at this, I ask myself the question, okay, what can be done? Really, I ask myself the question that you asked. If there isn't the political realities that make it possible right now, and by the way, I should take a step back before I say what can be done and just add the following. We are dealing with an international and regional reality where the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is nobody's priority. Okay? Is it the priority of the United States? No. There's Ukraine, there's China, to a lesser extent, there may be Iran. It's not a priority of the United States. And the United States, one can criticize the United States, but the only party that has ever had any ability to affect both sides in the conflict is the United States. You know, I once, in the beginning of 2005, I went to Gaza and I spoke. There were a couple hundred Palestinians there, including something I didn't discover until I walked in, when I saw Mahmoud Zahar, and I realized there was the whole lineup of Hamas was there. And I basically, this was before Israel, this was when Sharon had announced he was withdrawing, but hadn't withdrawn yet. And everybody there said, I went through and gave a brilliant speech, I can say, which affected nobody, but I gave a brilliant speech, which I won't recount now. But when I finished, all the questions were not really questions, they were comments. And all the comments were, the U.S. isn't an honest broker, you can't be a mediator. This was the beginning of 2005. We had experienced 4 years of the Second Intifada. So I asked everybody, I said, okay, you said the U.S. can't be a mediator. The Bush administration had come in and they had walked away completely from what we had done during Clinton. So under Bush for those 4 years, we hadn't been an honest broker, a dishonest broker. We weren't a broker at all. We walked away from it. And I asked this audience, which had not been shy, I said, can anybody here tell me that you're better off after these 4 years than you were with the U.S. walking away from it? And an audience that wasn't shy, no one raised their hand and said they were better off. And I said, the U.S. didn't block the Europeans from coming in and being a mediator. It didn't block the Russians from coming in and being a mediator. It didn't block any international organization like the UN from coming in and being a mediator. But none of them came in and were mediators. Why? Because they understood they didn't have the means to be able to change things. China today presents itself, look, we mediated between Saudi Arabia and Iran so that they restored their diplomatic relations. Think there's real peace between the two of them? You think that China's assuming any responsibility if this breaks down? And by the way, the Iranians are increasing the level of arms they're providing to the Houthis right now. You think the Chinese are going to stop that? I'm not saying the U.S. is this perfect mediator, because obviously we're not. What I am saying is, if the U.S. doesn't play a role, nobody else steps in to play the role. So, it's not a priority for the United States. It's not a priority for the Europeans because of Ukraine. Even the resources available, the Europeans might have provided before, they're not available in the same way that they were before. I'm getting the sign I have 5 minutes. I was just getting warmed up. Okay, so the context doesn't lend itself to any big sort of peace initiative because of what's here, what's with the Palestinians, and nobody else, including, by the way, the Arabs. This is not a priority issue for the Arabs. So if it's a priority issue for nobody, what do? You'll do two things. You will build from the ground up. You will take these kinds of projects to show that cooperation is possible. First thing we have to demonstrate for Israelis and Palestinians alike is that cooperation is actually possible and makes things better. Okay, we can't solve it, but we need to demonstrate that you can change the reality for the better. So the projects that you focus on, let's give them greater exposure, let's show the payoff, let's build on them to do more. You need to show not just the public, you also need to show those who might contribute and be donors. Okay, you're not doing a whole lot else, but here you can do something. And you do something for the better. You have already succeeded in gaining some significant donations, at least from the EU. There is a $50 million a year that is available in the US to promote projects that enhance cooperation between Israelis and Palestinians. The measure should be what makes a difference. One of the things I want to continue to push, I said I've already tried so far without success, but it doesn't mean I'm stopping. If that were the case, I wouldn't have continued to do what I do. I want to focus very heavily on water infrastructure in the West Bank and in Gaza, because I want to show that you can demonstrate for Palestinians something that everybody there will realize there's a change. You make water much more available, everybody in the West Bank and Gaza will note, okay, something's different. If we're going to restore a sense of possibility, we have to show that something is different. Now that's a bottom up, but there's also a top down. This is where the Abraham Accords come in. The Abraham Accords say the UAE is not walking away from the Abraham Accords. It's lowering its profile, but it's not walking away from it. There is, when it comes to certain kinds of projects, including, by the way, in this area, there was an announcement today. There's a cooperation between an Israeli firm and the UAE on building satellites with the kind of reflectors that are designed to, in a sense, absorb certain kinds of rays from the sun. If you build this on a large enough scale, you begin actually to be able to change the temperature. Obviously, this would be huge, even bigger than green hydrogen and the like. But here's a deal that's just been done on something very practical. I want to bring the Emirates into doing for the Palestinians what they did with Jordan, the investment in a solar field, which is not, it's moving ahead even if there's some problems, a solar field where they provide energy to Israel and Israel provides water to Jordan. Why can't we do something similar for the Palestinians in terms of either something like that or major investment in water infrastructure for Palestinians? Now, for them to do that, it also requires cooperation with the Israelis. That's fine, because what it does is it shows you can change the realities on the ground. We need to think about how you do the bottom up, but you also then think about the top down. The U.S. right now, what is the U.S. doing? The U.S. is trying to broker a normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Right? The Saudis are focused primarily on a set of conditions that are in their interests. Not a surprise that Saudi Arabia now is shaped by a leadership that uses nationalism and modernization as a source of their legitimacy and their identity, not Wahhabism. So they will rationalize whatever's in their interest, they'll do it, they'll take that step. At the end of the day, they will say, okay, we have to do something for the Palestinians too. We need to use this outreach, this move towards normalization. You basically say, okay, what are the kind of things that can be done for the Palestinians at the same time? With the UAE, with the countries that are part of the Abraham Accords, How do they use their leverage with Israel to also take steps towards the Palestinians? You begin to break this sense that nothing can be done and time is up. So I'll take one more minute even though time is up. You begin to show from both levels, from the bottom up, but also from the top down, that you can change what is a paralyzed situation. If you begin to show that something can change, then you begin to restore a sense of possibility and hope. We can do a lot when there's a sense of hope. We can do a lot when you restore a sense of belief. We can do a lot when there's a sense of possibility. You know, I'm doing a new book on statecraft. The essence of statecraft is you marry objectives and means. It has to always be based on an assessment of what the real situation is. But you also realize you don't have to scale back your objectives, but you have to basically be realistic about what you can achieve and when you can achieve it. Smart statecraft says, okay, I know what my ultimate objective is here. I can't achieve it right now. But I have to change the conditions. So what I can't do today, I can do tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. We need to use what is a commonality on environmental issues and demonstrate that we can begin to change circumstances on the ground, but also demonstrate cooperation pays off. We need to legitimize the idea of cooperation at a time when it's challenged. We need to be able to put Palestinians in a position where when they're cooperating with Israel, they don't have to hide it. Or when they're cooperating with Israel, it doesn't have to be exclusively under an international umbrella. So again, it's sort of disguised. We have to change the circumstances. We also have to change the Israeli mindset to look at cooperation with the Palestinians as a good thing for Israel. We will not get to the more ambitious objectives until both sides decide that cooperation with each other is actually a winning issue, not a losing one. Where when you talk about peace, you're not looked at by both sides as being a sucker or naive. Those of you who are here who I've known for some time, you believe in it or you wouldn't do it. And you were frustrated by the fact that nothing was happening. So what you're doing, what the Arava Institute is doing, has to be seen as a source of inspiration for what can be done. And when I conclude, and I say this since my time is already up, there is something that can be done, but we have to believe it so that we actually do it.
Okay. So I think our time is up, and I hope that we managed to shine the spotlight on some of the projects that we managed to do in the last few years. And I really would like to thank, first of all of you for staying with us late. It's a short conference of 3 hours, but these 3 hours required probably 6 months of work and preparation. And this conference would be such a success without the great work of, first of all, Attili, please stand up. And the work of David and the Joint Implementation Committee of the Arava Institute and the Move for Community Development. And I hope that also we managed to prove to all of you that we managed to restore hope, and we will not give up. We don't have the luxury to give up. This is the way that we believe in it. Please join us to keep the great work and the momentum that we have at the Tareq Environmental Forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
There's still some cake downstairs.